All right. Good to go. All right. Well, appreciate you guys having me up here tonight. What Bill and Jim and I decided on for this month is a pattern called the Glades Minnow. So this is a South Florida pattern created by Mike Connor. I actually learned about this from one of Steve Cantner's books. If you guys have not read those before but like to fish South Florida, they're worth finding. He's known as the land captain. It's been a long time since he's guided as far as I know, but the man knows the Everglades, the South Florida beaches, and the Keys better than most anyone you'll meet. So this pattern in particular is a real simple craft fur pattern meant to imitate any number of small bait fish. So most of the time this means the sailfin mollies that are native to South Florida, or even the guppies, mosquito fish, etc. So kind of small blunt-headed fish living in what's usually black water situations. So one of the real keys to this is with the craft fur, we're going to use it both for the tail, but we're going to use that undercoat that normally gets pulled out or thrown away in craft fur to build a denser head. And the purpose of this is it's actually going to push a little bit of water. So when you're working these dark water systems, sometimes it's as much that energy passing through the water as it is the fish being able to see the fly at first. So to start this fly off, go ahead. You can use either mono thread or 70, 140 denier, whatever you prefer. It's going to be primarily covered up in the end. I just have white 70 denier here. And I'm going to go ahead and start about a third of the way down my shank, and I'm going to build a thread base extending all the way to the bend of my hook.
Right about the barb?
Yep, right over the barb should be good. So once everybody has that, we're going to take one of our pieces of the gold flat braid here. We're going to go ahead and tie that in right at the bend, just cover up any tips that are sticking out, and wrap back forward to roughly that start point, a third of the way behind the eye. So for those who have it secured, we can go ahead and you're going to take that flat braid and we're just going to wrap it forward over our thread base, and this is going to build the underbody of your fly. So we'll have a wing extending up over the top, but this will allow just a little bit of flash coming off the belly of this pattern.
The goal just ends right about a third shank back.
Yeah, about that initial point where we tied in our thread base. And go ahead and secure that with a couple wraps of thread, and you can trim that excess right off. All right, so if everybody is done with that step, next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take our lighter colored tan craft fur, just one of the bunches, and you can either, if you have a small brush out some of the undercoat ahead of time. We're going to save this to make a head again and set it to the side. Or if not, we'll just go ahead and clip it off at the base and we'll pull that undercoat out with our fingers once we do so. So kind of hold your craft fur by the base and just trim it off as close to that backing as you can. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you know, you'll get a little more of the undercoat the closer you get to it.
Do you want that entire bunch, Chris, like to have cut it, or about something less than?
So I tend to do the entire bunch because by the time I measure it out to the length we're going to tie in, it's tapered to the point where you really won't have as much as you think you do. So you end up with something like this. Hold it by the midsection, and you can go ahead and pluck out that undercoat that exists and set that to the side, and we'll use that for the head later on.
Do the brown as well?
We'll do the tan first. We're going to do the tan, and we'll repeat in a moment. All right, so looks like everybody in the room has theirs about ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and hold this by the base, and we're going to go ahead and measure out 2 to 2.5 shank lengths of craft fur from our tie-in point. So this is one of those things where they are smaller baitfish patterns, but at the same time, I've tied these too short, and they kind of look like a tadpole and just don't swim well. So try to give yourself at least 2 shank lengths worth of wing. Once you've measured that out, so I've got 1, 2, tie in here. Once you've measured that out, go ahead and swap hands, and you're going to hold it right behind your thread along the top of the shank. And we'll go ahead and secure it with a couple of wraps right in front of that braid underbody. Due to the length of the craft fur, you can have a whole bunch sticking forward. So just go ahead and trim that right in front of your tie down point. And again, it doesn't have to be all that pretty. We're going to build a head over this front section, so you will cover most of this up. So, try not to have anything covering up your eye, of course, but otherwise does not need to be perfect. So once we have that in, we're going to go ahead and take another piece of that same braid that we haven't used yet. And you can either use your bodkin, a comb, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to turn that into flash, kind of pull it apart into its strands. And we're going to tie that in right over top of that tan wing. So you want the fibers in the flash to extend roughly the same length as your wing. So just brushing that out, Mike.
You got 2, you folded it in half and did it?
I did not. I just brushed from one end,
Okay.
and doesn't need a great deal of flash. Just something to add a little bit to the pattern. I've used Krystal Flash, Angel Hair, any number of things for this. So go ahead and spread that over top of your craft fur wing once you're ready, and tie down at that same tie down point.
What's the length of the flash?
I go right about equal to the wing itself.
All the way down the back, all the way down the tail?
Yep.
Okay.
And then you can go ahead and just trim whatever's extending forward. There we go.
You say you just trim off the full part?
Yep, anything ahead of your tie down point, you can just clip off and use that for another fly later. Alright. So once we've got our flash in, we're going to go ahead and take that darker patch of craft fur and we're going to go ahead and repeat the same process. So you can clip it off of that backing, hold it by the midsection, and we're going to,
Bunch?
yep, I use the whole bunch and just try to pull that under fur out and set it to the side again, and that'll also be part of the,
Pull it out. Yes, sweet.
alright, and once you have all your undercoat pulled out and set to the side, we're going to repeat the same process as with that lighter tan craft fur. Go ahead and measure about 2 shank lengths, and we'll tie that in right over top of the flash and that tan piece of wing.
It's about the same length as
Roughly the same length, yep. I mean, if you want it a little shorter or longer, if that helps improve the taper, go for it. But yeah, it's pretty close to equal length. And then, same as before, whatever's ahead of your tie down, just go ahead and trim that and toss it in your waste pile. All right, how are we doing? Everybody have that wing in? All right, so next step, we're going to take each of those little stacks of undercoat we took out and go ahead and try to line up the fibers as best you can, kind of like you would do with laser dub before you use it. So kind of just pull and even them out and pull and even them out. And do this separately with the tan and the slightly darker brown. Everybody good on that? Looks like it. All right. So we'll go ahead and take that tan patch and we're going to tie it in right in front of our wing along the bottom side of the shank. So go ahead and hold it and kind of spread it up on either side of the shank on the underside, holding it behind your tie down point. And we'll go ahead and do two kind of loose wraps and then cinch it down. So you should just get kind of a bushy mess going both directions underneath the shank.
And bring it up on, around the hook.
You're just going to have this on the underside, and then we'll use the brown as the top of it. As stated, go ahead and repeat along the top of the shank as well with your other clump of underfur. All right. And then once you have that in, going to go ahead, push the front facing pieces back just a little bit, pull your thread through, and you can go ahead and whip finish right behind the eye of the hook. Oops, back into focus. So once you've whip finished, you can clip your thread. And you obviously have a big old mess here, so the next step is going to be to kind of trim this to the shape you want. So the goal is you want something fairly thick that's going to push a little water. So trim something that's a little thicker around than the tail you have behind it. Okay. All right. So if you are as artistically disinclined as I am and cutting evenly is not a strength, I've been getting poor remarks on that since grade school. One of the nice things you can do with this pattern is you can either leave the head like this, or you can take either like a flex cement or flex UV resin, and you can actually coat the head, which will help kind of form a little better shape to it, and also helps it hold up a little better as well. So it won't collapse as much in the water, it'll push a little more water.
So when you trim, what's your goal supposed to be, just sort of streamline it or what?
Semi-round, bulky head, yeah, something that'll push a little water. But yes, streamline enough that it's going to swim straight in the water column. Which, of course, I'm looking at the side of the fly you guys aren't seeing, so for all I know, the other side's even worse than what I'm seeing.
Yeah, one side looks great.
Yeah, that's...
I do too, you want
So, I'll put a little flex cement on this since I brought it.
put the flex cement on the, body of the fly?
Just on that head that we built, yeah, that bulky section at the front.
Okay.
So don't put any on the tail, but you can just kind of, I'll apply a little bit to my fingers and just try to shape it as best you can. Again, it adds a little rigidity to it. By no means necessary, but it is in his original pattern as a way to make them, I guess, push a little more water and last a little longer. Right. Now that I have flex cement all over my fingers, it'll make the next step fun. But so once we've done this, the final step is simply to add eyes to your pattern. So probably not necessary. I know there's a lot of debate on whether or not eyes add anything to a fly. That's kind of a personal thing, but if you want to use them, all you need, a little bit of super glue, stick on eyes. One thing I will say with this that I wish I could remember who brought it up, but a show I was at in Dallas last February, you may have been with me, Catch. One of the streamer experts was talking about how he never compresses the eyes when he glues them on his streamer because it just changes the shape and the motion of the pattern. So he turns his fly sideways, puts his drop of super glue on, lets the first eye settle, and then repeats. He finds that his flies just have better motion in the water when he does that. If he squeezes in, he compresses the head and it changes the entire motion of the fly in the water. And wish I could remember who it was that said that to us. I think you were with me when we heard him say it, but that was a long time ago at this point. Maybe so. I can't for the life of me remember who told us.
I have Harbor Freight, does anybody need super glue? Got super glue, got super glue. Oh, just like this.
I didn't get the head big enough to move my eyes on it. It's a streamline version. Had a little bunch of the scrap work.
Oh, and it's definitely one that takes a little while to get the head right.
I didn't use a big enough portion, so I got all the trash. So I just used what I had left over.
I mean, mine,
That's a streamline work.
that's all right, as long as it pushes a little water.
It was big.
Fairly ugly, and the head on mine could still use a little cleanup, but gives you a gist of what we're looking to do with this. And again, nice thing is, black water, the fish aren't getting that good of a look at it most of the time. They're just seeing a silhouette that looks like a molly and hopefully smashing it. So it does work, and you can use it here locally as well. In Cantner's book, he mentions that beyond this kind of original color palette, he likes the all chartreuse version, and to me, I really like all chartreuse as well. Jim, I know you tie something similar with the bad hair day in chartreuse sometimes, and it works. I've caught shoe pick on this pattern. I've caught big dinner plate bluegill on it, some bass, and an assortment of stuff, invasives down in South Florida. So, yet to get a tarpon to take one, but that has to do with more in me and my inability to time the tides when I'm in the Everglades.
What size are you using for a brim?
I'm using I think a 6 usually I'm tying it on for the brim. I mean, the brim I've caught are larger brim on it, so they're willing to take a fairly big baitfish pattern. But usually this size, this is a 4, correct, Bill? Right, yep. This size and then one size down to a 6 are usually the 2 sizes I tie it on.
What's the six?
Oh, this is the 6, okay. So yeah, you can go this and then one size up from this.
Give them some super.
But again, you can also use this to imitate a mosquito fish, so you could potentially downsize this by about half and imitate your desired bait depending on what you're going after.
Biggest challenge of the eyes is getting even on both sides.
Thankfully, the fish is only going to see one side or the other. Just remember that.
That's it, on one eye. Another problem we use in the food.
On the bottom next to the student fish.
True. Very true.
Yep.
Fish next to it.
Yeah, but
Chris, you found the eyes stay on with this super glue pretty well?
Yeah, super glue seems to do the trick. I mean, it won't last forever, but it'll hold up for a few fish. I've had, even with UV resin, I've had more issues with the eyes breaking more often than they just fall off. Just especially, some of the Amazon ones that are a little less expensive. They'll be good for 3, 4, 5 fish, but then you may just end up with the white backing and the actual eye is falling off when you get the fish out. All right, any questions?